There was a small black voice recorder hidden behind the third row of cookbooks in the kitchen, the ones she never touches. I found it by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for that stupid booklet with the air fryer times because I can never remember how long asparagus takes, and there it was. It didn't have a label, just a little switch and a low battery light blinking like a warning. I thought it might have been mine, something from the garage, or maybe one of our grandkids left it. So I played it, and the first voice I heard was hers. But not the voice I know. Not the soft, low, sing-songy tone she uses when she talks to me, or the one she uses on the phone with the kids when she pretends she didn't forget their birthdays 2 years in a row. No, this voice was raw, sharp, almost angry, like she had waited years to let it out. Entry 146, she said. I had that dream again. The one where I tell him everything, and he just sits there with his stupid sad eyes and says, okay. Like always. Like that's all he's ever been capable of. I froze. She wasn't talking about someone else. That was me. I knew it immediately. That stupid sad eyes, line cut like a blade carved just for me. And it didn't stop there. She kept going. Talking. Confessing. Venting. For 37 years, I've played this role. Good wife. Quiet wife. The keeper of his boring little routines and his emotionless apologies. But I can't die like this. I won't. Calvin is dead, and now there's nothing left to wait for. That name again. Calvin. Who the hell was Calvin? I didn't know what I was hearing. A diary? A breakdown? Some kind of twisted spoken memoir she was planning to turn into a podcast? The more I listened, the colder my hands got. She talked about him. About a life that almost was. A future she had planned that didn't include me at all. And worse, she talked about our marriage like it was a burial plot. Like I was the dirt keeping her under. Sometimes, I wonder if I told him the truth, would it even register? Or would he just nod and ask if I want toast? I stopped the tape right there. Not because I'd had enough. I hadn't. I was starving for every word. But because she walked into the kitchen and I nearly jumped out of my skin. She didn't notice. She never notices. Not really. She asked if I'd seen her reading glasses. I pointed to the counter. She said thanks and walked away. I watched her leave and realized, I don't know this woman. Not at all. But she knows me better than anyone, and still chose to lie. For 37 years. And that was only one recording. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, my wife of 37 years, listening to her soft, measured breathing, and all I could think about was the voice recorder hidden under a pile of old takeout menus in the drawer beneath the coffee maker. That thing had burned a hole in my consciousness. I kept hearing her voice in my head, repeating that line like a sick lullaby. I won't die like this. Calvin is dead. There's nothing left to wait for. I waited until she left for her morning walk. She always walks the same path, same jacket, same neighbors waving like they're in a Hallmark movie. I watched her go down the sidewalk from the upstairs window, the recorder already in my hand, my fingers trembling like I'd been caught stealing something. And in a way, I had. I sat at the dining table, the one we bought on clearance from a closing Sears in 1999, and hit play again. The entry picked up where it left off. She spoke about how every anniversary felt like a funeral, how she would write letters to Calvin on our wedding anniversaries and keep them hidden behind the insulation in the garage. She said the garage was the only place I never cared to go. She wasn't wrong. That's when she mentioned the number. Entry 146. That wasn't a one-time vent session. That was a series. I didn't even know the thing could store that many files. I started clicking through. Scrolling. Each entry was numbered, labeled with a date. The earliest one, August 3rd, 2007. That's 16 years ago. I counted them manually. 211 entries. 211 days, or nights, or stolen moments when she spoke into that device instead of speaking to me. And as pathetic as this sounds, I was terrified to hear them. But I knew I would. That day, I listened to 3 more. Entry 89 was the one that nearly knocked me off my chair. She was talking about my retirement party, the one I thought was a beautiful moment of love and family. She laughed while describing it, mocking the way I cried during my thank you speech, mocking the way I asked her if she'd been happy all these years. He actually asked me, like a child seeking gold stars, "Am I happy, Claudine? Have I done well?" God, I wanted to scream. I sat there for maybe an hour after that, just broken. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. It was worse than that. I felt like a character in a play I didn't know I was in. Like I had been cast as the dull, dependable husband, while she rehearsed soliloquies about a man I'd never met. A ghost named Calvin who somehow still had a heartbeat inside her. Then I made a decision I probably shouldn't have made. I went to the garage. There's a space behind the second set of cabinets, the ones I never use, the ones filled with holiday decorations and dead spiders. I moved the insulation carefully, like I was peeling back skin, and there they were. Letters. Dozens of them. Yellowed. Some sealed. Some open. Some smeared with what I can only hope were tears. And one of them was addressed to me. She had written it 11 years ago, on our 26th anniversary. It started with Dear Delbert, and ended with, I'm sorry you never knew what I gave up to be yours. I folded the letter and put it back. I didn't cry. Not because I'm strong. I think I was just too hollow to produce a tear. She got home that afternoon and kissed me on the cheek. Asked me if I wanted tacos or soup for dinner. I said tacos. She smiled, as if the world wasn't slowly crumbling between us. As if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because now I knew. I was living inside a story she never wanted to finish writing. And I was starting to wonder how far it went. After I found the letters, I stopped listening to the recordings for a few days. Not because I didn't want to know more, but because I knew I wouldn't be able to stop once I started again. Like a scab you keep picking, even though you know it's going to bleed. I told myself I needed time. Time to think, to breathe, to convince myself that this was just emotional venting. Some people journal. Some people record themselves ranting into an old $19 voice recorder from Radio Shack. Maybe it didn't mean anything, but even that little lie didn't last long. 3 days after the discovery in the garage, I noticed something that set off alarm bells in the back of my skull. Not loud, just a soft, sickening ring I couldn't shake. She got a call in the middle of dinner. Normally, she lets spam calls go to voicemail. But this time she excused herself, took the phone into the laundry room, and shut the door behind her. That had never happened before. She was gone for almost 10 minutes. When she came back, she smiled, sat down, and said, "It was just Tammy. She's going through another thing with her son." I nodded, but I already knew Tammy had moved to Arizona last fall, and they hadn't spoken in months. I knew because I helped her pack the box of sweaters she mailed to her. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I went through her purse. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe another letter. Maybe a photo of Calvin. Instead, I found something completely ordinary and completely wrong. A debit card. One I'd never seen before. Different bank. Different name. Not her maiden name. Just C.M. Harlan. Her middle name is May. Her last name is Harlan. But she'd never used the initials C.M. for anything. I took a photo of the card, careful to put it back exactly as I found it. My heart was racing. My hands were cold. I felt like a high school kid breaking into the principal's office. The next morning, while she was gardening, I called the bank. Told them I was calling on behalf of my wife. Gave the name. The card number. They asked for verification. I made up a story about her being hard of hearing. I must have sounded desperate because the woman on the phone eventually gave me one detail, and it was enough. The account had been opened in 2009. She had a checking account I never knew about for over 14 years. And then the rep said something I'll never forget. "Would you like me to read you the most recent transaction, Mr. Harlan?" I didn't correct her. "Yes," I said. There was a pause. Typing. Then she said, "A wire transfer. Last week. $6,000 even. Sent to A.P.O. box address in Astoria, Oregon." Oregon. That's where Calvin had lived. She told me herself. He died there. She went there for the funeral, alone. Said she needed time. She was gone for 4 days. 4 days I spent eating frozen meals and trying not to spiral. I remember welcoming her home with flowers, asking nothing, respecting her grief over a friend. And now I find out she wired money to someone, something, in that town, right after he supposedly died. I hung up the phone. My stomach twisted. I had more questions than ever. Was Calvin even dead? Was she still in contact with someone connected to him? Was this whole funeral thing just a story, a test to see if I'd finally ask questions? Later that day, I asked her how she was feeling. "You've seemed distant lately," I said, trying to keep my voice level. She smiled and said, "Just tired. Spring allergies. You know how I get." Then she kissed me on the forehead and went back to folding laundry. And I stood there thinking, I'm not sure if I know anything about how she gets. That night, I listened to 3 more recordings. In one of them, she said, "I think he suspects something. He's looking at me differently. He's asking soft questions, like he's trying not to break me. But I know that look. Delbert's starting to realize he married a woman he can't read." She laughed. It wasn't cruel. It was sad. Like even she wished it wasn't true. But it was. And now I was caught in it. A web of lies 37 years old, and counting. It's funny what the brain holds onto when your world starts unraveling. You'd think it would be the big things, like the secret bank account, or the voice recordings, or the mystery man from Oregon whose shadow keeps growing across your life. But no, the moment that stuck in my head like a fishbone wasn't any of those. It was a single sentence, spoken over toast and black coffee the morning after her so-called trip to Calvin's funeral. She said, "The cemetery was on a hill, overlooking the coast. It was beautiful, peaceful. I'm glad I got to say goodbye." She looked me right in the eye when she said it. Here's the problem. A week after I found out about the wire transfer to Astoria, I started looking into obituaries, online archives, local newspapers, even Facebook community pages. I didn't search for Calvin, because she never told me his last name, just that he played jazz and lived alone near the water. But I did search death records for the town. Nothing matched. So I went further. I searched cemetery records in and around Astoria, looking for a burial that fit the window of her trip. And I found it. Or rather, I didn't. There had been no burials during that 4-day period. Not on a hill. Not near a church. Not even a cremation listing. I called the 2 cemeteries in town, pretending to be a local history enthusiast. They were polite, thorough, and certain. "No services held here during that time, sir." That was it. She lied. She didn't forget to mention something. She didn't protect my feelings. She made up a fake funeral with a fake view of a fake hill. And I had eaten it up like a fool. Like a man so desperate to believe his wife still loved him that he ignored the sound of his own instincts screaming from the back of his skull. The next evening, I brought it up. Carefully. We were watching TV, some home renovation show where every couple looks like they haven't touched each other in 5 years, but still want an open-concept kitchen. I muted the commercial and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about your trip. What was the name of that cemetery again? I want to look it up." She hesitated. Just for a second. A flicker of something crossed her face. Then she smiled. "Oh, it wasn't a public one," she said. "It was this private family plot Calvin's relatives used. Very small, no signage. Just off a gravel road." Gravel road. Not a hill anymore. Interesting. She forgot the lie she told me. I nodded and said nothing. But inside, my blood went cold. She was improvising, making it up on the fly, which meant she never expected me to ask. Which meant the funeral wasn't just a lie. It was a cover for something else. Something she did while she was supposed to be grieving. And I still didn't know what. That night, I waited until she was asleep. I poured a drink I didn't need and went out to the garage with the voice recorder again. I picked entry 173. I don't know why. Maybe because it was sandwiched between 2 entries that sounded innocuous. This one was different. She was whispering. "He's asking questions now. I think he looked in my bag the other night. I moved the card. I moved everything. But if he ever finds out what I really did during those 4 days, I don't think he'd recover." My hands went numb. I rewound it. Played it again. "If he ever finds out what I really did." The way she said it wasn't scared. It was calm. Resigned. Like someone who had crossed a point of no return and wasn't looking back. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked her car. I know how that sounds, like I'm paranoid or obsessed, but I needed to know what she was hiding. There was nothing obvious. But in the trunk, beneath the carpet lining, I found a flash drive taped to the frame with gray duct tape. It had one folder on it. The folder had a password. I stared at the screen for an hour, trying every obvious combination I could think of. Our anniversary. Her birthday. Her cat's name. Nothing worked. Then I typed Calvin. Access granted. The folder opened. And what I found inside changed everything. But I'll save that for part 5. I didn't open the files right away. I should have, I know. But I just sat there with the folder open, staring at the file names, afraid to double-click anything. It felt like I'd stumbled onto something radioactive. Like if I looked too closely, something would change in me that I couldn't reverse. There were 8 files in total. 6 were labeled by date, all within the 4-day window of her trip to Calvin's funeral. The other 2 had names. One was titled July House, and the other, chillingly, just said confession. I opened the most recent dated file first. It was a video. Poor quality, low resolution, probably taken on some cheap burner phone. The camera was pointed through the windshield of a car, filming a small cabin off the side of a dirt road. It was misty, early morning. Oregon coast terrain, maybe. There was no talking in the video, just the sound of breathing, her breathing, and the windshield wipers rhythmically scraping across the glass. The camera zoomed in, just slightly, as a man stepped out of the cabin. Tall, thin, white beard. He was carrying a trash bag. I paused the video. My entire body was buzzing, like I'd swallowed a handful of bees. If that man was Calvin, the man who was supposed to be dead, then everything, had just been flipped upside down. And if it wasn't Calvin, who the hell was it? The next file was more footage. This time, the camera was inside a room. Wooden walls, a small kitchen. It looked like it had been filmed in secret, from a crack in a closet door or behind some shelves. The man was cooking eggs. Alone, calm, unaware. My wife's voice could be heard very faintly behind the camera, whispering to herself. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, determined. Not angry, not scared, focused. The file cut out suddenly. Black screen. I sat back in the garage chair, still gripping the mouse like it was trying to escape my hand. I hadn't blinked in what felt like minutes. I could hear the TV inside the house. I could hear her laughing at some daytime game show. And I wondered how many people had no idea who they were married to. How many people were living with strangers that just looked familiar. The next file, July House, was different. It was a document. A PDF. It had property information, blueprints, price estimates, mortgage application forms. The name on the file? C. M. Harlan. She'd been applying for a home loan in another state. By herself. Under a different name. There was a note attached to the file. It was a photo of a post-it note. Looked like it had been snapped quickly, probably by accident. It read, keys under third stair. Utilities handled. Don't contact me unless it's done. Done. That word again. Done what? I backed out of the folder and opened the last file. Confession. It was a video. This time, the quality was better. It looked like it had been filmed in a motel room. The blinds were drawn. The lamp beside the bed was on, casting everything in this yellowish, sickly light. She sat on the edge of the bed, knees together, wearing the same gray sweatshirt she'd left town in. She looked tired. Not sad. Not scared. Just finished. She looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, I either left it for you on purpose, or you found it without asking. Either way, I guess you deserve the truth." I froze. My mouth was dry. He didn't die? Calvin didn't die? He faked it. He needed to disappear. Too many people looking for him. The wrong people. She sighed. I didn't go there to grieve. I went there to help him vanish. One last time. But when I saw him, I realized I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. The ache was gone. He was just an old man, broken in ways I never saw before. So I gave him the money, and I told him to go. Wherever. Just not back. She paused, rubbed her eyes. I thought maybe I'd go with him. But I didn't. I came home. To you. I wanted to forget it all. But now I think. I just want to start over. Alone. The screen flickered. I'm sorry, Delbert. I really did try. But I can't live in a life where I keep secrets from you every time I look you in the face. I'm tired. You deserve someone who isn't halfway somewhere else. She leaned forward and turned off the camera. That was it. No tears. No drama. Just a woman quietly leaving behind a man she'd already emotionally walked away from years ago. Not for Calvin. Not for someone new. But for no one. For herself. I sat there for a long time, not knowing if I felt betrayed or relieved. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shattered. I just felt erased. Like I was the footnote in her story. And she had just closed the book. After watching the video labeled Confession, I didn't eat for 2 days. Not out of spite or drama, but because I genuinely forgot how to do normal things. The routine of my life. Toast in the morning, feeding the birds, crossword at noon. All of it collapsed like wet paper. I moved through the house like a tourist in my own museum, staring at old photos and wondering which parts of our life she'd been faking, and for how long. Every smile in a frame started to look like a warning sign I'd been too blind or too trusting to read. But here's what I couldn't stop thinking about. If she really intended to leave, why hadn't she? That video was recorded 3 weeks ago. She was still here. Still cooking dinner. Still asking me if I wanted to rewatch old episodes of Murder, she wrote, still pretending to be the woman who whispered goodnight and rolled over like nothing was breaking between us. So either she changed her mind, or she was waiting for something. The idea of confronting her haunted me, not because I feared her reaction, but because I had no idea what I wanted. What was I hoping to hear? That it was all a test? That Calvin was a dream, a decoy, a psychological experiment, and I'd passed? No, I wasn't that deluded anymore. But I needed to know one thing above all. Was she still planning to leave? That question followed me into the basement 2 nights later, where I went looking for an old box of tax forms, and instead found something else, a photo frame. One I didn't recognize, tucked into the back of a drawer that hadn't been opened in years, behind dusty tins of paint and spider carcasses. The frame was silver, plain. Inside it was a photograph of my wife, and a man. Not me, not Calvin, unless Calvin had grown a full beard and 40 extra pounds. This man looked younger than either of us, maybe in his late 40s, with a leather jacket and a cigarette in hand, his arm wrapped around her like they'd known each other for decades. They weren't just close, they were intimate. Not romantic, but bonded. That kind of closeness that doesn't come from lust. It comes from shared secrets. The back of the photo had one sentence, handwritten in my wife's delicate cursive. This time, we finished what we started. I don't remember sitting down, but when I came back to awareness, I was on the basement floor, knees bent, hands shaking, staring at the words like they were a curse carved into the page. This time, how many times had there been? I took the photo upstairs and scanned her face over and over, trying to find something in her expression that would unlock it all. Guilt, nostalgia, fear, but there was nothing. Just that same half-smile, like she was still keeping the last piece of the puzzle for herself. Later that night, when she went to sleep, I searched our bedroom while battling a storm of nausea. I hated what I was doing. I hated who I was becoming. The paranoid old man digging through his wife's sock drawer like a teenager looking for weed. But I had to. I needed answers. And I found one. Not the answer, but something worse. A set of printed boarding passes, folded neatly inside the cover of an old gardening magazine. They were for 2 people. One name was hers. The other wasn't mine. The destination? Panama. Date? For days from now. She hadn't changed her mind. She was still leaving, just not alone. And not with Calvin. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her in our marriage-worn bed, listening to the steady rhythm of her breath, counting the seconds between each rise and fall of her chest like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. For days until Panama. For days until she walked out of our life with a man I hadn't even identified yet. 4 days to decide if I was going to pretend I was still the man she thought I was, quiet, safe, passive, or if I was going to become someone who finally asked why. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would follow her. Not to Panama. Not yet. First, I had to know who the man in the photo was. Not Calvin, that much I was sure of now. Calvin was either long gone or a myth she used as cover for someone else. No, the man with the cigarette and the leather jacket was someone newer. Someone still active. Someone dangerous, maybe. I scanned the photo into my computer and uploaded it to a reverse image search site. Took hours. Nothing came up. But the jacket caught my eye, a faded patch on the sleeve, almost invisible. I zoomed in, enhanced the contrast, and saw what looked like the name of a motorcycle club. 3 letters. Local. So I started calling around. I called 6 clubs before I got a hit. One guy, some raspy-voiced man who answered with nothing but yeah, confirmed that the man in the photo was someone they used to know. Said his name was Raymond Beck. Said he vanished for a few years, then reappeared last year, living in a rented cabin near the county line. Kept to himself. Drove a black SUV. Didn't ride anymore. Too many ghosts, the guy said. Raymond Beck. I looked up every scrap of data I could find. He had a record. Burglary. Identity theft. A sealed case from 1993, which, if you do enough digging in the right forums, means it probably involved something federal. I found one grainy mugshot. It was him. Older, thicker, grayer. But definitely him. So now I knew his name. But I still didn't know what he meant to her. That afternoon, I did something I swore I never would. I placed a GPS tracker in the lining of her handbag. Not because I wanted to spy. Okay, fine, exactly because I wanted to spy, but because I needed the truth. Not her version. Not the carefully edited, Emotionless confessions she left behind like breadcrumbs for a man too spineless to chase them. I wanted real-time truth. No filters. No apologies. The next morning, she left early. Said she had a dentist appointment. I already knew she didn't. I was watching the tracker blink across the screen of my laptop, heading toward a town 30 miles west. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. She wasn't alone. I parked half a block away from a rundown diner with peeling paint and fogged windows. Through the glass, I saw her, sitting across from Raymond Beck. She was laughing. Laughing. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years. Not at my jokes. Not at our kids' stories. Not even at her own memories. But there she was, grinning like someone who hadn't lied, cheated, or erased an entire life with one blinking cursor in a Word doc labeled confession. I don't remember getting out of the car. My feet moved without my permission. I didn't know what I was going to do. Confront her? Hit him? Break down in the parking lot? And cry like a teenager who just got dumped before prom? But I didn't get the chance. She saw me through the window. Our eyes met. And something in her face changed. Not panic. Not fear. Pity. She stood up slowly, said something to him. He didn't even look surprised, and came outside. Delbert, she said, softly, like she was talking to a sick dog. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry. My throat was burning. The last thing I remember saying was, "You were never going to tell me, were you?" She didn't answer. She just said, "You shouldn't have come." And then she walked past me. Not around. Past. Like I was a street lamp or a speed bump. Like I wasn't the man who had paid her bills, raised her children, held her through 2 surgeries, buried her mother. Raymond walked out a few minutes later, didn't even look in my direction. Just got in his SUV and drove off with her. I stood there alone, on the side of the road, shaking. Not because I was angry, or sad, or betrayed, but because in that moment, I realized something far worse than all of that. She had been planning this for years, and I had only just begun to understand how deep it went. She didn't come home that night. And to be honest, I didn't expect her to. After the diner, after the way she looked at me like I was already packed away in some old drawer in her mind, I assumed that was it. That I'd wake up to a quiet house, some legal documents on the table, maybe a key with a note that said, "You keep the Buick." But that's not what happened. She came back the next morning. Alone. I heard her keys in the lock, heard the front door open like it was any other Thursday. She didn't tiptoe. She didn't sneak. She walked in with a purpose, set her bag down on the hallway bench, and called my name. I didn't answer right away. I was in the kitchen, sitting at the table, holding the same cup of coffee I'd been nursing for an hour. When she walked in, I didn't stand. I didn't yell. I just looked at her. And then, without a word, she sat across from me. For a few long seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she exhaled and said, "I was never going to Panama." I squinted at her, confused. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were the printed boarding passes, along with a letter, not handwritten, this time, but typed, clean, sharp, dated 2 weeks ago. The top read, "Emergency Extraction Contingency, R. Beck/C. Harlan." It was government paper. Official letterhead. NSA. I read it 3 times before I spoke. Turns out, Raymond Beck wasn't just an ex-lover or some mysterious outlaw with a tragic past. He was a federal informant. Years ago, long before I met her, Claudine had been involved in a short-lived witness protection stint tied to a white-collar financial case. Her role was peripheral. She wasn't a criminal, but she had seen something. And she was young. Scared. They gave her a new identity. A chance to start fresh. She took it. Buried it. Even from me. Raymond. He was the agent assigned to her at the time. He wasn't her secret affair. He was her handler. And the boarding passes? A backup plan. Not for escape. For protection. They had reason to believe someone connected to the old case had resurfaced, possibly in Oregon. She went to check it out herself, before they made a move. That's what the trip was about. That's why the funeral was fabricated. She couldn't tell me. Wouldn't risk pulling me in. The confessions? The recordings? She made them in case something went wrong. In case she disappeared. In case I was left behind without answers. I sat there, stunned. Processing. All those recordings I thought were emotional betrayals. They weren't about hating me. They were about shielding me. From what she used to be. From the fear that her past might cost me everything. And then she said something I will never forget. She said, "I never planned to stay gone. But I had to make you believe I would. Because if someone was watching, they needed to think I'd already cut ties. That you were just collateral. Disposable. That's what keeps people like you safe. I stared at her, my jaw slightly open. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw her clearly. Not as a liar. Not as a stranger. But as someone who had sacrificed pieces of herself I never even knew existed. All to protect a life she'd built with me. It didn't excuse everything. It didn't make the hurt vanish. But it changed something inside me. It gave the pain a shape I could hold, instead of one that gnawed at me in the dark. We talked for hours. No games. No filters. Just raw, hard truth. Some of it was ugly. Some of it was uncomfortable. But all of it, finally, was real. That night, we didn't sleep in separate rooms. We didn't say, I love you. But we did sit beside each other on the porch and watch the sun go down, saying nothing, just breathing in the silence that comes after a long storm. And that, somehow, was enough. Not a perfect ending, but a true one.